Hi everybody, today I want to talk to you about a new technology called PartyKit. PartyKit is this really new cool way to build stateful apps. So what is a stateful app? Well, I think to understand that, let's first talk about a stateless app. So stateless apps are apps you're probably very used to using, as it's the standard HTTP type app where you make a request and then you get a response. So it's a synchronous request to the server, and the request is always initiated by the client, here a browser. One of the important things to understand about stateless apps is the entire state is carried in the request, meaning the URL, the body, the cookies. That's the state that goes to the server, and then the server will reconstruct whatever it needs. For example, maybe it calls a database. So there's on one hand, it's good that the server doesn't have to keep anything around. On the other hand, it takes a bit of performance every time to recreate the state, to reconstruct the state. So there are some advantages. I would say for stateless apps, HTTP apps, a key advantage is it's synchronous. So a lot of times we want to make a request, we want to wait for the response, right? But there are some cases also where you wouldn't want to wait for the response, where waiting just takes up time. It is performant for some conditions because the server doesn't have to keep track of a ton of state. All the state is kept on the client and it's passed to the server on every request. So that does make the server more performant for that kind of load. And that makes it also easier to scale because then you can just add more servers. You don't have to worry about where you're keeping that data on at least the web server part. Maybe database is different. Now, where it does become a problem is when you have many requests. So here, for example, imagine that we have multiple clients hitting the server and they're doing tons of different requests. Maybe they're polling for some information to see if something changed. Imagine a payment is happening and you're trying to see did the payment complete, did the payment complete. So each of those checks, it starts taxing the servers. And especially if there's multiple people, multiple clients trying to do that at the same time, then the HTTP sort of stateless model starts to break down. And so this is where PartyKit comes in. It's a way that you can share state between many clients. So you can kind of keep that state around and you could asynchronously tell clients when changes happened. So to recap, I would say stateless versus stateful. If you were to think of the trade-offs between them, HTTP requests are better for occasional requests. Imagine querying a report or an occasional like reading documentation. It's maybe going to be run request every few seconds or minutes. So HTTP is better suited for that. If you're doing constant requests, like requesting a lot very frequently, like maybe a game, then a socket, a stateful approach is better. Same thing for real time. If it's a non-real time, like reading a blog, HTTP better. If it's real time, like a game, a socket would be much better. Same for interactivity. Probably better to use HTTP for non-interactive state. Now, HTTP does have to reconstruct the state every time, and that's okay if there's very few requests. But if you have a lot of requests, then you want to persist the state between connections. So HTTP is better, I would say, for the single user. And I would say stateful is better for a multi-player or multi-device type situation where there's many people accessing the same state. So reconstructing the state is too expensive. HTTP is better for synchronous requests where you want to wait for the response. Whereas when you start getting into many people, many players, you don't want everybody polling and waiting for responses. So you want asynchronous is better. And I would say stateless is unidirectional in that it's always the client that has to start the request, right? You go to a site, you type in the URL, so essentially you're the client requesting that page. Whereas with the stateful app, the server can also initiate, so the communication is in both directions. The client can send to the server, and the server can send back to the client. So yeah, so as you can see that both stateless and stateful type apps do have their place, and PartyKit is basically a new way to do stateful type apps. So I think it's a really great tool to have in your tool belt to kind of go along with the good old HTTP type style web app. All right, that's it for now. Cheers.